All right, we're going to attempt to do some threading tonight. And I'm going to start off by talking to you. When we go to threading wood, it presents some particular challenges for us. There are basically two ways to do it. One of them is with a threader. This happens to be a Bonnie Klein threader, okay? And the way it works is it locks here into your banjo, your chuck, which is part right here, goes on here with your piece already turned. It advances here. You dial in your adjustment right there. Also, that's Bonnie Klein. I don't think Bonnie makes those anymore. This is a Baxter threading jig, which is the one that Don uses. And it's basically the same thing, except Don's got it designed so it sits on a bed lathe. So his is actually a little bit more advanced because he doesn't have to set his up once it's set up like you do. So I'll come back in a minute and explains my personal pros and cons to that way. If you're going to hand thread it, you're going to have the opportunity to buy some more tools. Okay. It consists of 3 tools. It consists of a inside chaser or a female thread cutter, an outside cutter or male thread cutter, and a relief tool. Okay, and I'll show you how this relief tool works when we get there. My personal thoughts on well, let me cover these again here. These come in different, as do the jig threaders. These come in different TPI or threads per inch. Okay, this happens to be a 16. That is probably the most popular. It also comes in a 20. A 20. Yeah. These are 16. Okay. There's also a 20. The 20 is used for really small things like Don showed you these acorn things. Lee Sky makes them about that big, but you can't get a jig threader to go in because it's too small. The cutter bit won't go in. So, and they also come in either a 12. I've seen 12s and I've seen 10s, and that's generally for big urns or big vessels of some type where you want a big thread. This is the first time I've done this, so I'm going to have to read some notes here. These particular tools are made by Robert Sorsby. Okay, they're about, I don't know, $90. This other tool here is homemade. You can buy one from them, and they'll probably sell it to you for about $40, or you can just make one yourself. It's pretty simple. If you go with a jig type threader, they are, if you can find one used, you're going to pay about $350 for it. If you buy it new, it's going to be between $500 and $600, and that's not all of it. You also have to have a cutter bit that goes into your lathe, and that cutter bit's about $60, and then you got to have a collet system to hold that cutter bit. And what's a collet system? $100, somewhere in that area. So you're going to spend $700 or $800 to do it the other way. So my pros for the jig threader is that you can turn most all wood with it. You can cut threads in most everything, which you can't do by hand. And we'll see that a little while later. Your success rate with a mechanical threader is generally pretty good from the beginning. Small learning curve, and you're good to go. My objections to them are number one, they're expensive, and I just told you about what they cost. And number two, in most cases, you got a cutter bit. Yeah, well, they're sharp. We won't pass it around. Can you go to the overhead? Overhead. This is your cutter bit. It's a high-speed steel or carbide. I don't know which one it is. High-speed steel or carbide, depending on what you get. It goes into a collet system, okay? And part of the problem is it's really designed to turn at about 10,000 RPMs, and your lathe's only going to go to about 3,600. So you have to cut really slow with it, or it boogers it up. Thank you, Don. Yeah, router. Yeah, and it cuts a lot better at that speed. So the things that I have against the threaders machines is that they're expensive, obviously. And in Don's case, he's got his problem solved. But in my case, I have to set it all up every time I want to use it. And I set it up on the lathe, and the lathe turns slow. So sometimes I get a fuzzy thread out of it. And my success rate, I'm sure his is much better than mine, simply because he's got it set up on a router, and it's a router bit. So if you go to hand chasing, the advantage to them is they're inexpensive. Okay, you can get everything you need for about $100. They're quick to set up because they're already set up, ready to go. Okay, your success rate after you learn to use them is fair. I won't say it's absolutely great, because you can get what I call a crumbling thread, which we'll go over a little later. And the bad part about them is it's like a skew. There is a learning curve. Okay, and if you're not willing to take on that learning curve, you're not going to be successful with it. Now, came up to my house before I even knew him and said, I want to learn how to turn threads. And we sat down, and in about 3 hours, I guess, I had him turn a beautiful thread. Now he's gone home. He tells me he doesn't remember how to do it. I'm glad I didn't teach him how to use a skew. But the learning curve is it's kind of rough, and we'll see it up here. The biggest problem about it is it limits you to the kind of wood you can turn, unless you want to go to a little extra trouble and use CA glue. Lee Scott out of South Florida is absolutely the champ on using CA glue and turning threads. Another way to do it is if you had a piece of wood and you went ahead and stabilized it, and which basically means you've impregnated it with some type of plastic material. And that's another easy way to do it. So you're going to be looking at a tight grain wood. I'm going to try some dogwood up here. Dogwood works pretty good. And I'm going to stay out of the exotics. Look, Cocobolo turns great. African blackwood turns great if you got the money to go buy them. Okay, a piece of African blackwood big enough to turn is probably $20. And if you mess it up, I'd rather have your $20 if you want to get rid of it that bad. So if we talk about woods that are available to us, dogwood, Osage orange, hard maple is fair. If you want to use a little super glue, works pretty good. Persimmon works pretty good. But the problem is one piece of dogwood may work really well for you, and the next piece of dogwood may not work so well for you. Okay, so it's a little bit harder to do. The way we're going to learn is we're not going to learn on any kind of wood, because they all have grain. They all have, different densities. We're going to learn on a piece of PVC pipe, which is what's right here. Okay, and I'm going to teach you, or you're going to get to see it demonstrated in what I call, and I just named this, by the way, and the nice thing about doing a demo for your own club, and if you don't like seeing me, you need to come up here and demo for us, okay? That way you don't have to look at me. Is I'm calling this the NASCAR technique, okay? We're going to use a NASCAR technique, and we're going to thread this piece of PVC, and I need a NASCAR driver, okay? Somebody other than me, and I'm going to call on Rita, because Rita always loves to volunteer. And I'll show you how you can learn how to thread to start with. Rita, this may be too high for you. Can you get that high? Is that going to be in the center? You sure? You're going to have to hold it just a little bit. Now, here's what I want you to do. We're going to do are you on the overhead? Go to the overhead, please. We're going to do a NASCAR thing. Okay. Here's the grandstand here. We're going to come down through the straightaway. We're going to turn right there, and we're going to come around the turn. We're going right down that fall right there. And we're going to come out. And we're going to do this just like that. Okay? Okay. And you're going to get the feel for that. And I want you to do that because I'm going to time you. Okay? Okay. Now, listen. You're the worst NASCAR driver in the world. I am. Okay? Rita the wreck, or wrecking Rita, okay? And you got the slowest car in the world. So you want to go nice and easy and slow. Everybody's going to lap you. Go ahead and give it a try. No, we're not going to turn it on. We don't need it on. Don't touch it. Just go right down through there. Well, come out. Start right there. Go right down through here. I don't want you touching it. We're not ready to touch it. Okay? Now you pick a speed that's good for you. Call it whatever you want. When you come out, come out.
When you start, do you start like in the middle?
We'll get to that in a minute.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah, you're going to start about right there. Okay. Okay, so and you're going to run down through. You're going to miss the first two and try and catch on about the third. Okay. Okay. But I want to see what speed you're doing, and I want to show you why. You need to come out at that line. Don't go past the line. Yeah, you're really slow.
Yeah.
That's okay. Okay. So now I want you to imagine that you're trying to speed up just a little bit,
Okay.
and you're a terrible driver. So when you come down here and you go into turn one here and you go into turn two, you're kind of fishtailing and your tool's coming around like that, and then you're straightening up going after there. So it's going to be kind of like this. Okay.
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 So the same thing.
Yep.
On the third. Like
Yeah. Somewhere in the middle.
Okay.
It doesn't matter. You're going to square it back up. You're going to touch the wall right there with your back into your NASCAR, and then you're going to straighten it back out. You're riding right down the edge of the wall. Okay, now let me show you something. We on the overhead? Rita was taking about 3 seconds to do that. In my mind, I was timing her. If I turn this lathe on, the proper speed for cutting threads is somewhere between 200 and 500 RPMs. And if you go to YouTube and you watch 4 or 5 of these things, some of these guys cut at 250 and some of these guys cut at 450. The speed you want is the speed that works for you. Okay. Now, Rita will get faster later, but right now she's turning pretty slow. There's a problem with turning in the lower speed around 200, and I'll tell you about that in a minute. But that means that 200, if I were to turn this lathe on, it's 16 revolutions per minute. There's 16 teeth in this tool. It would take 1 minute for this tool to go from here all the way to that line right there. That's 1 inch. That's the reason I told her to go to that line. So that would take a full minute at 16 RPMs, revolutions per minute. We're going to change revolutions per minute to seconds, okay? So if this lathe is turning, and these numbers really don't matter or anything, I just want you to know where they come from. At 200, that's going to take her almost 5 seconds to go that 1 inch with this tool. That introduces a problem called a drunken thread. You don't get it floating all the way down. It stops and starts like this. And if you cut one, you'll feel it. You'll feel the tool pulsate when you go through the wood. You jump it up to about 300 RPMs, and now you're talking about 3.2 seconds. That's about where Rita's at. She's taking about 3 seconds to go down there. So 300 RPMs is probably a good, maybe just under, would be a good RPM for her to start to learn on. Okay. If you get up about 400, it takes about 2.4 seconds. I turn her between 350 and 400. That's the speed I turn at. If you get up around 500, I think you're a little too fast, personally, but I've seen people do it, especially on short threads. Now, what she's going to turn and what we're going to turn tonight is going to be much harder than turning a lid for a box. And I'll explain this to you now before she tries this. If you go to your pantry, and this is, everybody's got to vote on this now. I want to see some hands. If you go to your pantry and you grab a jar out of your pantry, whether it's pickles or relish or mayonnaise or whatever it is, and you take it out and you screw the top off, how many people think this top comes off in 1 turn or less, 360 degrees or less? If you think it comes off in 360 degrees or less, raise your hand. I got 3 people, 4 people. If you think it comes off in 1 to 2 turns, raise your hand. Okay. If you think it comes off in 2 to 3 turns, raise your hand. Does anybody think it takes more than 3 turns? Three-quarters of a turn. 3/4 of a turn. What that means is to be successful, you notice Don said he had too many, you had to turn the lid off. To be successful, all you got to do is be able to cut 3 threads. Just 3 threads. It'll work like a champ. Now this is also a little long. It takes a 1 1/4 turns to get this lid off. But you look at it, there's 2 threads on the bottom. Now there's more on the top, but there's 2 threads on the bottom. And that's all it takes. What we're going to turn tonight, or let me rephrase that. What we're going to attempt to turn tonight is going to be some nuts and bolts. Now, these were the practice pieces I did for the different kinds of wood. I would suggest you don't take the nuts off because some of them want to cross thread because they're kind of sloppy. Okay. But you can pass them around. This was the last one I turned, and I think it was the most successful, so I stopped. Always stop when you're a winner, right? If you look at them, if you look at the threads, you'll see some of the threads are crumbled. They've deteriorated. And later when we get to wood, I'll tell you what causes that. Okay, Rita, here's what we're going to do. I'm going to help you.
Okay.
Stand right there. Let me cut a relief first. We're going to need we need to get a place to get out of this thing. So let's get out right there. All right. Slow it back down. I'm going to give you 275 RPMs.
Okay.
Here's what we're going to do. We're going to start like this. Okay. Loosen up. Loosen up. We're going to come down here and we're just going to touch it right here.
Okay.
You got to keep it moving. You can't stop. You can't stop. All right. All right. Now see what you did. You double cut it there because you slowed down. It's got to be one fluid motion. So let's take that off and try again.
So one fluid, don't
Yep.
stop. Okay.
You got to have the same speed all the way down. Once you get started, yep, very light pressure. Once you get started, it will self-feed. Okay. This is the only thing I don't like about turning plastic. Makes a mess. Now that's not straight anymore, but that's okay. Watch me one time, okay? It's a scraper. It's got to be up. You need to be moving when you touch it. It needs to already be in motion when you touch it. Easy, easy. You're pushing too hard. There you go. Yeah, keep running. Don't let it come on down. All right, let's stop it there. There you go, your first thread.
Wow.
Thank you, Rita. That is the technique to get started. Okay. It's one fluid motion. Think of it as a racetrack as you go in, and all you're going to do is you're going to touch the tool in. Now we're going to go to a piece of wood. And you'll see some of the challenges that come up with wood that don't come up with plastic. Yes, sir.
Help if you started with something that was already threaded and followed through.
You need to learn to track. Yeah, probably. That wouldn't hurt to get that motion started. The hardest part was that very, very beginning where they call, when you first start. It's called striking a thread. I had to remember the word, striking a thread. And once you get that thread, once you get 2 or 3 threads on there, you're good to go. Now, if you're doing a box, you'd want to actually turn about 4 or 5 threads, because in the end, you want to get rid of those first 2 or 3 because they're usually not very good. They're not as good as you want when you finish. So I've got a piece of dogwood here, and I practiced on it a little bit. We're going to put it in here and we're going to turn it down. Now, normally, if I were turning a box, I would do this different, and I'll tell you how I would do it differently. I would thread the female thread first. I would turn inside the lid first, okay? And then I would fit the outside thread to that. And the reason I would do that is because the outside thread is easier to manipulate than the inside thread. So I would establish what my inside thread is going to be, and then I would cut my outside thread to fit it. I found when you start doing these long bolts, that doesn't work at all, actually. It's very difficult. And the reason it is because the inside thread is the hard one to get correct. And once does somebody have a bolt back there? Somebody just tossed me one of those bolts. Just throw it up here. If I turn this piece first, okay, and I don't get it perfect, it doesn't matter what I do down here, it'll never fit right. But if I turn this piece perfect first, I can see it. I can put a micrometer on it. I can measure it. I can make sure I don't have a drunken thread on it. And then I can turn this piece to fit this piece. And I found it's much easier to do it that way. My success rate like went from 50% to like 90%. All right. So we got a piece of wood on here. Okay. If we're going to turn the outside, we're going to turn the bolt part first. We're going to drill the nut part. If I were turning it as a box, is that box still going around? Yeah, don't worry about it. If I was turning it as a box, what I would do is I would turn the thread on my lid and I would put my micrometer on it and I would measure it and I would determine what diameter I needed to turn my male part. Everybody follow me? I got my outside threads already turned. I mic it. I set my inside. We're kind of doing it backwards now. We're going to turn the outside first. So I really need to know what size my inside, my nut is going to be. Well, my nut is going to be 0.875 diameter on the inside. And the reason I know that is because I'm going to use a 7/8 inch drill to drill it. And that's what it is. It's 0.875. Now, the bolt part has to be bigger than that for the teeth to engage. If I made it 1.875 and the other one 0.875, the teeth wouldn't align. The threads would not align. So it's got to be bigger. So how much bigger? Well, it's kind of a trial and error thing, but I found out, and I can tell you the trigonometry behind it. Trigonometry says it's 0.6233. But if you make it if you make it 0.06233, it won't go together. The threads won't fit. So I start off about 0.05. Now I know I lost you, but that's okay. Because here's what we're going to do. I'm going to gain your trust back here real quick and show you. I like to lose you every now and then, makes you pay attention. So we've got our drill bit here, 7/8 drill bit we're going to use. And I'm going to mic it, and it should come out. And it should come out, well, it should be 0.875. These, no, I don't think so. It's 0. These drill bits Jason recommended are not very accurate. There you go. All right, so you see I have 0.866. Okay, I'm going to assume that it's actually going to be 0.875. So what I'm going to do right here is I'm going to add to this 50 thousandths of an inch. That's going to bring me up to let's go about 9.2 right there. Okay, that's the diameter that my bolt should be. And if I lost you, show up Saturday and I'll explain it to you again. Okay, so we're going to turn this piece, and it has to be symmetrical. It has to be parallel. It can't go wobbly, wobbly, wobbly. It has to be true, or it's not going to thread very well. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring this down for that caliber to fit. And no, Paula, I'm not going to wear a shield. Paula's a safety person. But I will be careful. Frank's not going to wear a shield either. Close. Some point in time along here, you can always take a block of wood with some sandpaper on it and sand this and get it flat and straight where you want it. In case you're wondering, this tool I'm using is called a Badan. It's like a wide parting tool that has a relief cut in the side. That's like really, really, really close. It's like sandpaper close. I think we can go with that. I'm going to do two things here. Move it up just a little bit. I'm going to chamfer this edge right here where I'm going to go in with my tool, and I'm going to cut me a release place so I can get my threader out when I get there. I have to be able to get out of this thing. Because if the threader stops, it tears all the threads out. Yeah, I'm going to take just a little bit more down. Just bear with me. We'll get to the exciting part in a minute. I'm sorry, folks, there ain't an exciting part. But it did sound good, didn't it? The exciting part was Rita. All right, gets a little bit fat right there at the end. See that? I'm good right here. A little bit right there at the very end. I'll touch that. We'll have it, and we'll move on. Yeah, I can. Right after I get it. So here's my caliber set up, and there it is all the way down. Gets a little bit bigger right here at the end. Actually, it's got a hump in it right here. It's just a little bit high. So I might as well go ahead and take that out. Figure out what to do with it. Right here was just a little bit high. All right, that should do it. We're going to thread that. Now, I'm going to attempt to thread this without using super glue. There are two things you can do. One of the problems you have is what's called a crumbling thread. And a crumbling thread happens when you're turning a piece, overhead please. And you see the grain right here. I don't know if you see that grain right here. When you get to this side grain right here, it wants to tear it out. It's not attached to the wood it's where the grain is. So it wants to just peel off a chunk. And if you looked at those coming around, you saw a spot there. And if you looked on the other side, 180 degrees, there's probably a spot on the other side. Super glue helps relieve that problem as you go along. And we may need to use it. If we do, I will. Yeah. But it presents other problems too. Okay. Part of the problem that you don't realize is that this threader that I'm fixing to use is 16 TPI. Okay. But each one of those is a triangle. So that means each side is a 1/16 of an inch. So this is a scraping tool. When I stick this tool in this wood, I'm actually sticking a scraper in there that wide. Now, if you've ever stuck an 1.5-inch scraper inside of a piece of wood, you know that it has a tendency to grab things and tear them apart. And that's part of the problem. So one of the things you can do is sometimes you can try a little soapy water. I did not find that worked really well for me because it wants to swell the fibers up. Some people use it. Another thing is, we may try it before we try the super glue, is some beeswax. I got a little beeswax back here in an emulsion that's softened it up. That'll help the tool slide through a little bit better. The last thing you want to do is use super glue, and you don't want these threads to come to the same point this is. If you let them come to a point, it's going to tear them out. They're going to be threads that are kind of flat at the top. They're going to kind of look like pyramids with the top knocked off of them if you look at them through a microscope. So let's see if we can get this thing to thread and see how it's going to thread. I'm going to dial this down to about, now, that's a good speed, 364, okay? Need to raise my tool rest. The scraping tool needs to be at center or just slightly below. The handle has to be up. I'm going to do my same rotation here, and I'm going to come in here and try and strike a thread. Now, one of the things I'm doing, if you'll see this lead tooth right here when it comes in, that lead tooth is not touching. And I will not let it touch the wood until I've got a complete thread down it. Then I can let it touch. If I let it touch before I get the thread all the way to this relief, it's going to rip all these threads out. It has to stay in motion. Right pressure. See, now this is not hard, folks. Sorry. That's correct. You've got to get the feel. But the biggest secret is the tool has to be in motion before you fall in. If you let it fall in and try and get it in motion later, it's not going to work for you. It's got to be moving before it touches. That's the reason I'm starting over here like this, coming in like that. Let's see what we have here for a thread. Not bad. It's not crumbling. Let's put a little wax on it and see what that does for us. See if it makes them a little bit cleaner. It's a little bit rough. We'll try this, and then we'll try a little glue if we need to. See how those are coming off a little bit better now than they were before. I'm just letting the threads pull the tool along. You notice how that tool, can you see that tool jerking just a little bit as it's going along there? You watch that? That's where the threads want to do this. Okay. That sometimes makes it hard to thread into another piece. One way to help avoid that is to have a better quality of wood. That's the easiest thing. Another one is start with a little bit faster when you strike these first few threads you strike are going to determine how the whole piece is going to go, because it's going to flow that tool through the piece. So if you get the first few right, the whole thing will go good or go well. Right. And so what I'm gonna do is I look at it, I'll stop it and I look at it and I'll see that the top of these threads are still flat. Now, if I want to show you how to super glue it while we're going here, I bought this super glue that doesn't smell so bad. I put a little super glue on it. Huh? Yeah, okay. I have to see too. This is the thin super glue. This is the 3408, which is the stuff that doesn't smell so bad. Uh, why do you ask me these questions? You got to then wipe some of it off. If you don't wipe it off when you hit it with accelerator, it all foams up and you got a mess. Don't wipe it off with your finger.
It's great.
Oh.
So while that's said, in just a minute, I'll tell you a story. I went to the Florida Symposium, I don't know, 10 or 12 years ago. Scott Crumpton, who was the president of the Bell Woodturners at the time, he and I were sitting right where Frank's sitting and right where Bill's sitting. And this national presenter came in and he had a piece that he wanted to do and he puts a bunch of super glue on it. And he takes his stuff and he goes, and the first 3 or 4 rows start coughing. And we thought, oh, great. And he looks at a minute and he goes, with that accelerator again, and people started getting up and leaving. Now, Scott and I were stupid. We just say there and choke, We didn't leave, but we should have. So I try to be mindful that this stuff does smell bad. Okay, I'm coming back up to my speed again. I got about 390 on here. It's going to start turning kind of rough because it's super glue. So I want to have a really light touch. I don't want to tear anything up. So hold the tool very lightly. Please hold it down. See the super glue coming off? If it comes off and it's not nice and flaky, like somebody just mentioned, have you a stainless steel brush and brush it off before it gets good and hard and come off really easy. All right, let's go back to cutting this. That's a pretty good looking thread. I think we can put a nut on that. And maybe a little bit more.
What are you looking for?
One more cut. I'm looking at the top. I'm looking at the top of these things. So if I had a perfect cut, it would be like that. Right now, it's like that and it's flat on top. But the flat's a little too big. I want to bring it in a little bit. I want it to be a little bit more pointy than the end, but I don't want it completely pointy because if I try and get it like that, it's going to tear the threads out. This is one of those, you want to know how I know that? Yeah. Now I'm putting very little pressure on there. I'm just letting it run down through there. And I may have to super glue it again if I don't have it yet. Yeah, I think we can make that work. That's close.
Does it pay to try to clean them out with a brush?
Yeah, you can clean them up a little bit. And the way we do that, here's a brass brush. We'll clean them up a little bit with a brass brush. And then I'll go ahead and put a little wax in them. Because you're going to want a little wax on them somewhere. Now, since I turned this thing square, it's going to chip, and there's no way for me to avoid that fact that it's going to chip a little. I'll try and alleviate as much of it as I can. Sometimes you can take a skew and kind of do this to it about right there. Stop some of it. All I do is take that over to my belt sander and sand it off, make it look a little bit better. So if you I'll pass it around, but pass it around, I'm gonna need it back. So take a look at it. While I clean this off, drill a hole in it, and get ready to do the female end. Yes. No.
Instead of starting flat.
Yeah.
Cut yourself an angle. So you come up and then in.
Well, I'm doing that. I'm actually beveling the edge.
Oh,
You're
okay.
I'm just chamfering it a little bit, and I'm bringing the tool in there a little crooked. So yeah, you didn't see me do that, but I did. Yeah, it's gonna be an ugly bolt. Doesn't sharper. Oh, look at how much nicer it cuts when it's sharp. I'll bring that on the person that sharpened that gouge. Okay, we're gonna drill a hole in this. All we got to do is find the drill bit. I'm gonna put that's about 3/4 of an inch. I know that because that piece of tape's on there. And that should be plenty of. So we've turned our male. We threaded our male side. We're going to thread our female side. We're going to do what Don just said, only on this part. We're going to put a little chamfer right here on the edge to get the tool started. And I think the easiest thing to use is just All right, Don, there's your edge you were talking about. It only has to be 1 tooth wide. Okay. All right, now, when we talked about a relief, if I go down through this hole with this female chaser, I've got to be able to get it out. If it hits the bottom of the hole, it rips out all the teeth, all the threads that I've cut. So that's what this tool does. Where are you? Oh,
Go to
okay.
the-
That's what this tool does. It's got this little hook on the end. It was made from a scraper. If you folks ever have a chance to buy old tools like this, you know, you get them for $5 somewhere, buy them because you can turn them into decent tools to do other things with. I got a bunch of them that I've made into other things. Now, I want to go in. I want my nut to be about 3/8 of an inch wide. That happens to be that little mark right there, if you can see it. That little grind mark right there. Turn it just right. That's 3/8 of an inch. I'm gonna go in about 3/8 of an inch right there. And I'm gonna go to that till it won't go anymore. Now that should give me enough room to get in and out. And I got a very expensive tool here. Remember, blow. Get my light up here. Okay, I'm gonna do this one. Same way, I'm gonna put this tool where it strikes out the center or a little bit high. A scraping tool no, I've got one here. That's okay. A scraping tool has to be, to work, has to be at 90 degrees to where it's touching or less. If it goes this way, who knows what that's called? A catch, a major catch, okay? When you're on the outside of a piece and it's rolling to you this way, that means this tool needs to contact the center of the piece or just below the center of the piece. On the inside, it's coming at you this way. The tool needs to catch at the center of the piece or just slightly above the center of the piece. That way you don't get catches or you at least minimize them. All right. We're going to go back to our same speed that I had before. 382, that's what it hit at. Close enough. For me. Now, before we did the NASCAR thing, now we're going to do the anti-NASCAR thing. You got to learn them both. We're not prejudiced here. We learn them both. Okay. All right. Same process. I'm going to come in here a little bit crooked. And then as I establish this thread, I'm going to roll this handle around and straighten it up. Inside threads tend to crumble less than outside threads, and I don't know why. It seems like they ought to do the same, but they don't. The inside holds a better thread than it. Now I've got a drunken thread. You see how it's jumping on me? It may or may not work. Since we're there, we're going to keep going. I'll try and straighten it out a little bit with a little pressure. I can tell it's not going to fit yet, but it's getting there. Let's put a little super glue in it so that I don't tear it up. Try not to stick your fingers into turning things. Give that just a second. Anybody have any questions so far, or have I lost everybody? Yeah, occasionally you do, and all you do to sharpen it, I don't know if I brought a. I meant to bring a sharpener, but I think I left it laying on the table. All you do is just turn it flat on a diamond stone, do a little circle thing like that on your diamond stone as flat as you can get it, and it just brings the teeth back. You may can see. Can you give me the overhead? You may can see it right there where I've sharpened it. See how the light hits it. And if you look at this other one gets used more simply because I practice with this one more because it actually gives me more problems. You'll see it right there where it's been sharpened, right on the very end. So, all right, let's see if we can finish this up here. That's the reason I do this piece first. You see how it tightens up? That looks like a good thread. If I were to part that off and then turn this piece, I'd never get it to fit right because this is not done correctly yet.
At this point, is it because your threads aren't parallel or because your diameter isn't correctly matching?
Yeah, one of those. One of those. Not quite there, and it wants to cross thread just a little bit. That's another problem that you have with them. You have to be careful. You get them established good. There it is. And it's threads off just a little bit. Let's super glue it and run it one more time. And maybe that'll do it. Be careful to remember to slow your lathe down if you're super gluing on the outside. Doesn't matter in here. You want to know how I know that? Oh, yeah. Let me get this drying and I will. So this is thin super glue. It's 3408, which is the kind that doesn't smell quite as bad, takes a little bit longer to set. And it comes with a rather aggressive cap on it. Okay. And I don't want to take it apart, but you can buy these little additions to it. The problem is when you screw on, thank you, Frank. There's the cap that comes on. Okay. There's the cap that comes with it. And it's got a big hole and it's too big to get in tiny places. They make these little, Paula sells them. It's a bunch of little tips, and the little tip will slip on here. But it may not stay on there. And if you're down there doing this and you mash it and it comes off, you got a big mess. So what I do is I put the tip on here. I take some electrical tape and I tape around it so that it doesn't leak. I take this cap, I drill the inside out, I think with a 1/4 inch drill bit, and I screw it all together just like that. Now it won't come apart. You just put a piece of tape over the top. It's much more user friendly that way.
I found out the hard way when the bottle I put it in later blew up and had 4 ounces of super glue on my hand.
Oh, I forgot about that. Yeah.
My recommendation is hot water and 60 grit sandpaper.
I totally forgot that. See, that's the reason you come to meetings, to know that you're not the only person that screws up. Yeah. You know, you didn't have to tell that story, Jason. We had all forgotten about it a long time ago.
Can't rag before it. 'Cause it's old. Already ragged.
All right, this thing is wobbling because I got a little bit of a misthread in it, but it'll work. Got a little crooked somewhere. There it is. All right. Still a little tight. We're gonna leave it a little tight because I'm not gonna, when it comes to turning threads, I'm not gonna turn down a partial success. All right. Let's see if we can get that off there. I want to get it parted off at the end of my threads there, which is about right here somewhere. Get something I can see, maybe. Oh, I didn't drill quite deep enough. Hang on. Can't get this close and not have success. Yeah. I should drill just a little bit deeper. And I would have had the washer for it. I don't think I'm gonna get that out here. Anybody have questions so far? What am I doing? I'm using this design opportunity to fix a screw up. Okay? Yeah, they're actually pretty strong.
How to keep ashes in.
Yeah. It's a little tight. Polish it up a little bit. And you didn't get a washer because I didn't drill it far enough the first time. Now, this may be one of those things that you learn how to do it just so you can say, hey, I know how to hand chase threads. Right, Admiral?
Yeah,
And it may be something you want to utilize, you know? It, I went through that. You weren't paying attention. Shame on you. That's it, folks. Next month, we'll have somebody that'll do something much more simple, but how long does she spend doing those, Don? Or Don Penny? How long does Tracy spend? Yeah, playing with them. So it's interesting. Thank you everyone for coming. Cleanup crew, don't run off yet. Help clean up. All the guests, I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you come back. The members that joined the night that we met in the parking lot, thank you for coming back. Everybody drive safely.